Good evening. I'm Elizabeth Goldstein, and I'm the president of the Municipal Arts Society, and I want to thank you all for joining us this evening for this special screening of our 2019 Brendan Gill prize-winning film, Crime and Punishment. I know many of you may have joined us in March at our annual awards ceremony celebrating the city, where we were treated to an inspiring and insightful conversation with director Stephen Meng and Lieutenant Raymond about the creation and the impact of this film. I am deeply grateful for this experience, this opportunity to experience this incredible, challenging, and inspiring documentary again with an audience. The last time I saw it was in my living room with my husband. This will be different. Please join me in thanking the Ford Foundation for hosting us tonight and for their generous support of this film. I am reminded of Darren Walker's remarks on the relationship between art and social justice tonight. Without art, there is no empathy, and without empathy, there can be no justice. So finally, thank you to Stephen and the officers here with us this evening for bringing New York City closer to justice by bringing this story to the screen. Now it is my honor to introduce John Hayworth, an outstanding and long-standing member of our Gill jury, to kick off the evening. Thoroughly immersed in the arts of our city, John may consume more theater, ballet, opera, music, theater than any other person in New York City. He is truly our in-house cultural guru. Please help me welcome John Hayworth.
Wow, that was some introduction. I hope I can live up to it. Thank you, Elizabeth. It is such an honor to be here tonight to help introduce Stephen Meng's remarkable film, our 2019 Brendan Gill Prize winner, and also give thanks to the individuals who brought it to life. To begin, although he needs no introduction, I would like to say a few words about the man who inspired this auspicious prize. Longtime New Yorker magazine theater and architectural critic, author, former Municipal Arts Society president, and champion preservationist, Brendan Gill was a man of extraordinary intelligence and sharp humor. His friend and successor at The New Yorker, critic Paul Goldberger, said of Brendan Gill, "He wrote what he believed with equal parts love and courage. He graced MAS and New York City with his remarkable talents as a writer and activist until his death in 1998. The Brendan Gill Prize was first announced by MAS board member Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis in 1986. It is awarded annually to the creator of a specific work of art, a book, an essay, a musical composition, a play, painting, sculpture, architectural design, film, or choreographic piece that best captures the energy, the vigor, and the verve of New York City. It celebrates these exceptional contributions to the life of the city and promotes New York as a source of inspiration to the artists who live and work here. I would like to thank my fellow members of the 2019 Brendan Gill Prize jury who joined me in the humbling task of selecting the honoree this year. Stephen, on behalf of the entire Brendan Gill jury and all the New Yorkers moved by your work, congratulations on receiving this honor, the first of many. And I know we'll all have our eyes on next week's News and Documentary Emmy Awards. And to the police officers joining us tonight, please accept our heartfelt thanks for your extraordinary service to the people of New York. Finally, tonight in particular, I want to recognize the Ford Foundation, that lion of philanthropy whose support for this film helped bring the story of these courageous officers to audiences across the country, and how timely all this is. We are so honored to have you as our guest this evening. And now we'll turn the stage over to our colleague, Tanya Koch, who is the Ford Foundation Director of Gender, Racial, and Ethnic Justice, to say a few words. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Ford Foundation Center for Social Justice. Those of you who've been to the Ford Foundation before might have noticed that we have spruced up a little bit, and we are so pleased to welcome you here to our renovated space. On behalf of the entire foundation, and most particularly the Creativity Free Expression Unit, where our JustFilms unit is housed, I'm so pleased that we are able to host tonight's screening of this a very important film. I want to thank all of you for coming this evening, and in particular, some important public officials who have taken the time to join us this evening. So I want to recognize Elizabeth Glazer, who is Director of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. Marissa Lago, who is here with us from the New York City Department of Planning. And Anthony Miranda, who is Executive Chairman of the National Latino Officers Association. And of course, we are here tonight to honor and congratulate Stephen Mang, director of the film, on his recognition by the Municipal Art Society for its Brendan Gill Prize. And of course, we at Ford are so very proud and pleased to have supported the production of this important documentary. And especially, we're grateful for Stephen's vision for telling a difficult story about race, policing, and unequal justice in the United States and here in New York City, the city that we love. That critical love has elevated through this film the national discussion of these issues and helped to amplify the voices of the many brave individuals within law enforcement who are featured in the film and indeed who have risked their careers to speak up for the need for systemic change. As I indicated, Crime and Punishment was supported through Ford's JustFilm initiative, which provides production funding to artfully produced documentary films that are examining the root causes of inequality. Crime and Punishment is a film which is both committed to justice and beautifully, beautifully shot. It is a cinematically powerful film. We cannot say that of every film that we support, and I think it is why this film has so resonated with audiences around the country. And the film, of course, is part of a larger conversation happening across the country about criminal justice reform and the role of our police. It's forcing a deeper reckoning about police accountability and the legitimacy of law enforcement in Black and brown communities. And so here at Ford, in particular on behalf of my unit, which deals with issues of criminal justice reform, we are so very proud to be among a small numbers of funders who are encouraging that conversation and encouraging reform both from the inside of police departments and from the outside of those agencies. And that indeed is an approach that I think this film so beautifully encapsulates. So we hope that you enjoy the film, that you wrestle with the difficult issues it raises, and that we will all as a community engage more deeply in addressing the problems and concerns that you will see depicted in the film. And congratulations again to Stephen.
Hi, everyone. They asked me just to say a few words to kick this off. The first words are thank you so much for coming out. And thank you to JustFilms and Ford Foundation and Tanya, everyone on your staff. This is literally a film that could not have been made without a major supporter like Ford. This is, in a lot of ways, 7 years in the making, 4 years of observational filming and investigative work to allow an audience like you to then do the really hard work, which is help this film not exist in a vacuum of filmmaking, but actually be a real discussion and dialogue in the real world. And so that's why this is so exciting to see all of you here tonight. Thank you so much to Municipal Arts Society for the amazing Brendan Gill Award. Again, that only helps amplify the conversation that we're really trying to jumpstart because there are a lot of things that are in this film that I think you'll recognize, but then wonder why they are not part of a larger citywide conversation at present. And so I don't know what else to say other than please stick around because there are some very special guests. The main subjects and protagonists from the film are here tonight. You will not regret getting to hear them speak and answer your direct questions. So I just thank you so much for coming out.
Private Investigator Manuel Gomez, also from PD.
My name is Andy Gonzalez, 17-year veteran, NYPD officer.
Officer Pedro Serrano, 15-year veteran, NYPD.
So we're just going to launch right into your questions. We have 2 mics on the side. Please just step right up to the microphone and shoot.
Anthony, come down, brother. You're part of the
So to
film.
speak. Oh, yeah. Oh, Chief Anthony Miranda.
I have a question for the premise of how the money is made, if you could go through it for the collars and having the numbers and the arrests, because I don't understand how the money is made for the city. So if you could explain the whole premise, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. So with summonses, it's self-explanatory. Obviously, you receive the summons, you go to court, there's a fine, and it's a transaction that's pretty much right there. With the rest, it's a little bit more complicated. Over 80% of those incarcerated in the prisons upstate are people who live within the 5 boroughs. When they're there, they're counted as residents of, say, if you're in Sing Sing, you're counted as a resident of Ossining, not Brownsville, where you're from or where you were arrested from, or Flatbush, or Mott Haven, or Harlem, or Stapleton, or Southside Jamaica, Queens. So you're counted as a resident of where you're incarcerated, where you're doing your time as state property. So when it's time to distribute census dollars, Ossining, a town with maybe 3,000 people and 5,000 inmates, gets census dollars for 8,000 people that they only have to spend on 3,000. And every single person that's incarcerated and missing from the 5 boroughs, those neighborhoods are missing those dollars.
The NYPD also has over $5 billion annual operating budget that they have to justify each year. And, it's no surprise that this kind of idea of police proactivity in how aggressively it tries to fight crime the way that it does is a manner to justify that enormous budget for the department. So, CompStat, as many of you have probably heard about before, is the numerical accounting system for the policing that is done in this city, and those numbers mean a lot. So you can only imagine.
I also want to say one thing about the quotas. As you see, that the quota system is now not effective. All right, they said that it doesn't exist no more. Except before it was a quota. Now they changed the name to performance objectives, and that's in the NYPD Patrol Guide. And they have a performance objectives where they have to generate these summonses. So they did it so they can get away with it legally. Okay, and that's what they're doing.
Also, for every drug arrest, the feds send money to the city per body. So that's another revenue generating procedure.
Also, another way they generate revenue is not for the state, it's private corporations. Like you can have inmates making eyeglasses, and the total salary for all those people that's working is probably less than $5,000 a year. But those same lenses that they make, those private companies sell it for tens of millions of dollars. So that's really what it's about, is you can take able-bodied people, poor, minority, uneducated, sell them to work upstate or any state, and they could generate revenue for private corporations. So that's the ultimate goal. And the new prison to pipeline is these people in these detention centers down and on the borders. That's the next one going on.
Should we take a next question? Oh, sorry, Pedro.
There was also a state that actually sued the city for not bringing in enough prisoners because it was a contract. Google it.
And I would say, again, that's the criminal side of it. The court system, the court appearances, the court staff, the entire system gets paid based on the volume of business that's being generated. The DEA held a press conference once in front of the Queens Courthouse and said, when they were protesting the quotas or the arrests, and they said, we're going to stop making arrests, and they said, we're going to show you who's in charge. And in that week when they did it, they literally lost millions of dollars in the city because they stopped making arrests, and that was the message that they sent out. So it's not just the jails, it was the summonses, it's the court staff, it's all the personnel in between that's not getting paid. It's a system that's built on the numbers that is generated by NYPD, by the arrests and by the summonses that are given out.
I thought that they're going to develop the community work, that the cops are going to go into the community, get to know the community, and that way there will be less arrests and it will be a more peaceful community. I mean, is there any training for that? Has anything changed?
So what you're speaking of is it's called the NCO program, the Neighborhood Coordinating Officer Program. And on the surface, it seems very inviting, and the officers are there kissing babies and holding their own community meetings. But those same officers reach out to me, and they actually have some of the worst pressure, because in between all of the community things that they're doing, if arrests are not coming, they're pulled aside and say, aren't you getting intel? Because the way the old guard, the way they see it is the closer community ties allows for intel, and it does happen much more organically, because when people feel comfortable with law enforcement, they'll tell you what's going on in the neighborhood. But if that doesn't produce regular arrests, they're actually given a lot of pressure. The NCO officers, the community-based officers are given even more pressure to get the numbers in. It's just it's self-perpetuating. Unfortunately, no matter how much you try to redesign it, the people in charge, they can't help themselves. This is what they see as policing. It's unfortunate that they just cannot. The paradigm shift needed, they just can't do it. And the problem is, the people behind them, they've already contaminated. So even though you have young faces, even black faces, don't let it fool you. The people are still perpetuating the same system. The same things are still incentivized.
Just in the concept about community policing, it is an effective tool, but again, they put numbers behind it which destroy it, right? So it's putting something good up front and then putting what's behind it that destroys the entire concept and the meaning behind the relationships. Because community relations has improved, however, they go out there and they say, okay, now that you have that, now go get those summonses, go get those numbers. And the numbers process is what destroys anything that comes good out of the relationships that we have.
I'm sorry, with all the adjustments that the department is doing, the one thing they will never do is a real checks and balances, something that will check them whenever they go too far. That they'll always do these little things to show you that we're doing something to fix the problem, but they can always go back. 1 year, the marijuana arrest was a certain number. 1 year went down. The next year went right back up. There's no real checks or balances, and that's what we're trying to get, a real checks and balance.
When did this start?
So the contemporary quota system started in Mayor Giuliani's first term when he put Bratton in charge. Bratton introduced the broken windows theory, which basically said that over-enforcement of innocuous infractions will lead to bigger things sorting themselves out, and they determined each officer should have a particular number of summonses and arrests and stop and frisk to show that they're out there doing the work. And this thing spread like a cancer, and unfortunately, other departments bought it, and as I said in the film, it's known as the Ferguson effect, but this stuff actually starts here in New York. So about 1995, if you want an exact year.
Only in New York City? Sorry.
It starts in New York City, but it then spreads because Bratton actually only does 2 years, as commissioner, but then he starts a consulting firm. He gets hired in other departments and brings it there. His minions, they spread out. Timony goes to Miami and spreads this to Miami. Then Giuliani, after 9/11, after Bloomberg becomes mayor, he starts the Giuliani consulting firm and spreads this to Mexico, Trinidad and Tobago, all over the world.
But the culture of retaliation against officers who are trying to speak out against corruption, I mean, that goes back decades further. I mean, you know, the era of Frank Serpico, you know, this is the legacy that Frank started, that these guys have taken up. And I mean, you have to put it on that, in those terms. You know, these are cops who risk their lives to stand here in front of you and speak openly about this stuff.
What has happened with your case?
Which one?
The lawsuit?
The one that the lawsuit, yes.
So, as you saw in the film, of the 12, we were trying to get class action status. Unfortunately, we didn't, and of the 12 cases, 8 were dismissed. So 4 continue to go, and it's Richie, myself, Sandy, and Pedro. So the 4 of us here, our cases have gone forward, but the quota portion was also dismissed. To me, the most important part. So the discrimination that we faced because of, by being whistleblowers, this is what the city's trying to defend itself against. And it's to me, it's an embarrassment to the current mayor, who I supported, who I have friends who know personally. You know, it's an embarrassment because he ran on a progressive campaign, self-proclaimed progressive, you know, and it's, if you have the strength and the courage to know that the stop and frisk appeal that Bloomberg started was wrong, and to drop that, I applaud him for that. Why did you fight the NYPD 12? It doesn't align with everything that he's supposed to stand for.
I couldn't agree with that more. I just want to jump on that. These are the cops that de Blasio should be lifting up. These are the cops that were his campaign platform when he was running for mayor. And on Brian Lair, many months ago, I called in and I made a case and a comment against in the conversation, and he invited us to come in, share the film, bring the cops in. I was told I'd be followed up. There was never an invitation to come in. So that's the mayor's stance on the NYPD 12 and this issue.
What do you think of the system of putting 500 policemen in the subway to catch fare beaters who are largely minorities, low-income areas? Is there a quota system for that? I'm an activist to improve the subway accessibility, and many of us see that as a waste of money that could be used to fix the subway, install elevators for people with disabilities. I don't see policemen in my neighborhood in Chelsea at the subway.
So fare evasion is not something that should be ignored. I actually started my career as a transit cop. So as a police officer for 7 years, I was a transit cop, and the quota is actually 4 times more than what it is outside of transit because of something called the transit recidivism policy, which means if you commit any crime in transit, if you're arrested by any transit officer, any further contact with transit cops, you're automatically in arrest. So because of this, they expect you to have a lot more because so many more people are arrestable. We need other ways to deal with fare evasion. It's not the crime of the century to $2, $2.75, whatever it is now. And I'll tell you, don't let the numbers fool you in terms of the demographical data. Everyone beats the fare, okay? Everyone. When I'm in South Brooklyn, you know, my Eastern European brothers and sisters are jumping like gazelles, all right? You know, they always hit me with the I don't speak English, so I get my Russian friends on the phone and tell them they broke the law.
Just so we're clear that you guys understand, these are police officers on the street. Every unit in the police department has a quota. They have their numbers. Anti-crime units, the specialty units, they all have different numbers. There was even exposed in Staten Island where they put a chart on the wall and the anti-crime officers had to get certain numbers or they were removed from the unit. So when you're looking at it, this quota system is not just in summonses and arrests, it's more pervasive than that because it goes to every specialty unit they have, whether it's transit or housing, it's the same. Whether it's now that they took over the school safety officers, it's the same. So they've imposed this across the board.
Is there a quota for fare beaters?
There's a quota in every part of the agency that they call performance goals now, because they don't want to admit that it's an illegal quota system, and it impacts the officers' careers, their ability to transfer, and obviously the impact on the communities is even 10 times more devastating. And that's the struggle that the officers have here when he says there may be another 100 years before we get to the next generation of officers who are going to step forward. If they're allowed to be retaliated against, if their cases are allowed to be dismissed and not addressed, then what would the next generation of officers, who will come forward? So when they ask for community support, this is what the movie did for everybody. It brought the problem to light, so it couldn't be denied anymore. And without community support, there'll be absolutely no change and no justice, not only for the officers, but for the community residents as well.
We're getting a signal for one last question, if you want to.
You mentioned at the end that there's no agency that's set up to deal with these issues, but what about the NYPD Office of the Inspector General?
Well, I want to say right now, and I'm glad you brought that question up, because everybody remember this number. Bill number 5947. Myself and Serpico wrote this proposal for a new agency called the Department of Civilian Justice. It is now officially a state bill. I've been to 7 states, and I have them all enacting this bill. It will bring oversight over the prosecutor's office for the corruption that they do, and oversight over every police department statewide and corrections-wide. And here's the Serpico part that Frank put in there with me, and that is it will give the ability for cops like this to report corruption without fear of retaliation, so we don't have this. Please support this bill. And you can go on my website, Black Ops Power Investigators. I have it as a PDF, and you can download it. It's a 2-page bill, and it's called Department of Civilian Justice, and it's just what it says. It's a department which will bring oversight and answer that lady's question, where there is none. You cannot have a department check itself, monitor itself, and punish itself. Serpico did this. He said this, and what have we done? All these mayor's offices. It's in the state right now, bill number 5947. Department of Civilian Justice. Or you can go on Black Ops Power Investigators and download the PDF, and please let your Senate and Assembly members know that you're not going to vote for them if you don't support this. This was Frank's dream. What did they do? Did they change anything? No. That's why these guys are still here. But I said no more. I wasn't going to do this. As a United States Army officer, I said I'm going to write this bill, and I did it with Frank. And you want to know something? It's now a reality. Support us. Make this happen.
In closing, I just wanted to first thank you all for coming out, and second, let you know that these guys stand here before all of us after having endured a tremendous amount of not just emotional, mental stress, but financial as well. And there's no existing police whistleblower organization, support organization, or fund. And so what we've taken upon ourselves to do is to start one. And today is the first night that we're announcing it and launching it. It's this URL here. If you actually look at this postcard when you leave, they're on the banister here. You can see some brief information and then follow the link to read more about the fund. It's going to be run. We're going to start it up, and then we're going to hand the organization after it's turned into a 501c3 and turned into a nonprofit, and hand it over to these guys to run themselves. And so this is an experiment. We don't know if it'll work, but we know that a lot of cops, these guys and others who are coming to the fore, have been suffering. They get hammered. We're seeing record numbers of police suicides. Officer morale is low, and there's not a place to go when that happens. And so we ask you to spread the word about this, and thank you.
And one more thing. I have outside for you, excuse my part in the film, I have lobster tails for 90 people in here. So if you go into the next room, walk out, there's the holding room, you'll all get a piece of my favorite part of New York. All right? So please have some dessert with me. Thank you. I haven't seen you since March.